The laboratory hummed with a frequency that made Dr. Lyra Voss's bones ache. 3 kilometers beneath the shattered surface of Kepler 442b, the Intergalactic Empire Restoration Army's most classified facility existed in perpetual twilight. Emergency lighting cast everything in hues of amber and shadow, while the rhythmic thrumming of life support systems provided a mechanical heartbeat to their subterranean world. Lyra pressed her palm against the observation window, watching the slow rotation of the synthesis chamber beyond. Inside that crystalline sphere, suspended in a bath of quantum-charged plasma, floated humanity's last hope, Project Prometheus. The weapon that would either restore the Empire or damn what remained of civilization to eternal darkness. Another nightmare? Dr. Marcus Chen's voice carried the weight of someone who hadn't slept properly in months. His reflection appeared beside hers in the reinforced glass, dark circles under his eyes making him look decades older than his 43 years. The same one, Lyra replied, not turning from the window. The Devourers breaking through the planetary shields. The screaming as they consumed everything, every thought, every memory, every spark of consciousness. She shuddered. How many worlds have we lost to them now? 17,432. Marcus's voice was flat, clinical. As of last week's intelligence report. The numbers were staggering. In the century since the Dark World had erupted from the void between galaxies, bringing with it horrors that defied comprehension, the Intergalactic Empire had been systematically dismantled. World after world fell to the Devourers, creatures of living shadow that fed on consciousness itself, leaving behind empty husks of matter that still moved but no longer truly lived. Lyra finally turned from the window. Status report on the neural mapping? 73% complete. The AI matrices are integrating better than we hoped, but... Marcus hesitated. But the power requirements are still beyond anything we can generate with current technology. We need to tap directly into a star's core, and even then, the containment fields might not hold. They have to hold. General Thane Coraxus's voice cut through the laboratory like a blade. The imposing figure of the Restoration Army's commanding officer filled the doorway, his scarred face bearing the marks of 100 battles against the Dark World's forces. Failure is not an option, doctors. Not when we're this close. Lyra straightened, muscle memory from her academy days kicking in. General, the theoretical framework is sound, but the practical applications are beyond current limitations. Yes, I've read your reports. Coraxus stepped into the lab, his heavy boots echoing off the metal flooring. Which is why we're accelerating the timeline. Intelligence suggests the Devourers have detected our activities. We have perhaps 3 weeks before they breach our defenses. The room fell silent except for the omnipresent hum of machinery. 3 weeks. Lyra felt her stomach twist into knots. They'd been working on Project Prometheus for 7 years, and even with their recent breakthroughs, 3 weeks was impossibly optimistic. Sir, Marcus said carefully, rushing the final integration could result in catastrophic failure. The quantum resonance fields alone require. Dr. Chen. Coraxus's voice carried a warning. Let me be clear about our situation. The Fourth Fleet fell yesterday. The Devourers are now within 50 light-years of our position. If we don't deploy Prometheus within the month, there won't be anyone left to deploy it to. The weight of those words settled over the laboratory like a shroud. The Fourth Fleet, 30,000 ships, the last major military force of the old empire. Gone. Consumed. Their crews now shambling puppets in service to the Dark World. What about the other projects? Lyra asked. The psionic amplifiers, the dimensional weapons? All failures, Coraxus replied grimly. The psionic amplifiers drove their test subjects insane within hours. The dimensional weapons, let's just say they opened doorways we couldn't close. Prometheus is our last card to play. Lyra nodded, understanding the full scope of their desperation. She moved to the central console, her fingers dancing over holographic displays as she pulled up the project's core specifications. If we're going to attempt this, we'll need to modify the power coupling arrays. And we'll need test subjects. Already arranged, Coraxus said. Volunteers from the Restoration Army. They understand the risks. And if it fails, then we die knowing we tried everything. The general's expression softened slightly. But I have faith in your work, Dr. Voss. Both of you. The Empire's greatest minds working together one last time. As Coraxus left them to their preparations, Lyra found herself staring once again at the synthesis chamber. Project Prometheus, named for the Titan who stole fire from the gods, was their attempt to forge a new kind of weapon. Not one that destroyed matter or energy, but one that could wage war on the fundamental level of consciousness itself. The Devourers fed on sentient thought, consuming minds and leaving behind hollow shells. But what if they could create something that was both mind and weapon? Something that could think, adapt, and fight back on the same level as their enemies? Lyra! Marcus's voice was quiet. Are we doing the right thing? She looked at him, seeing her own doubts reflected in his eyes. I don't know, she admitted. But I know what happens if we do nothing. Every world, every system, every last spark of human consciousness consumed by the dark world. At least this way, we fight back. And if we succeed? If we actually create artificial consciousness powerful enough to stand against the Devourers? Then we pray we can control it. The mess hall of Sublevel 7 buzzed with nervous energy. 50 men and women, all volunteers from the Restoration Army's elite units, sat around metal tables eating what might be their last meal. They came from every corner of the former empire, survivors of the siege of Centauri, veterans of the Battle of the Spiral Arms, the last defenders of worlds whose names were now whispered like prayers for the dead. Captain Elena Vasquez pushed her synthetic protein around her plate, her appetite long since fled. At 28, she was already a veteran of 12 major engagements against the Dark World's forces. Her left arm was cybernetic, a replacement for the original lost during the evacuation of New Geneva. The phantom pain still bothered her sometimes, especially when she was nervous. Second thoughts? Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison slid into the seat across from her. His easy smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but then, nobody smiled much anymore. Not since the war turned. Always, Elena replied. But not about this. If Dr. Voss is right, if this weapon can actually push back the Devourers. Big if, Morrison said. Lot of people said the same thing about the psionic amplifiers. About the dimensional weapons. About the quantum bombs. He took a bite of his food, chewed thoughtfully. What makes this different? Elena looked around the mess hall at the other volunteers. Each one had given up everything, family, friends, any hope of a normal life, to join the Restoration Army. They were the last defenders of a dying civilization, and they all knew it. Because this time, we're not just fighting the Devourers, she said. We're becoming something they can't consume. Something that can fight back on their level. And if we lose ourselves in the process? Elena met his gaze. Then at least we'll have tried. The mess hall speakers crackled to life, and Dr. Voss's voice filled the room. Attention, volunteers! Please report to Laboratory 7 Alpha for final briefing and preparation. Thank you. As the volunteers filed out, Elena felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Somewhere above them, the Devourers were coming. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Dark World was spreading its influence across the galaxy like a plague. And here, in this buried laboratory, 50 soldiers were about to become something more than human. The briefing room was stark and utilitarian, with a single holographic projector in the center. Dr. Voss stood beside it, her face grave as the volunteers took their seats. General Coraxus flanked her, his presence a reminder of the military nature of their mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Voss began. What we're about to ask of you goes beyond the normal scope of military service. You've volunteered to participate in Project Prometheus, but I want to make sure you understand exactly what that means. The hologram flickered to life, showing a detailed cross-section of the human brain. The Devourers feed on consciousness, on the electrical and quantum patterns that make up thought and memory. They consume these patterns, leaving behind empty shells that they can then puppeteer. Our weapons, our ships, our entire military doctrine has been built around fighting physical threats. But the Devourers exist primarily as consciousness themselves. The image shifted, showing swirling patterns of dark energy. This is what we're up against. Pure thought, but thought turned malevolent. Consciousness without morality, without limits, without anything resembling human compassion. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She'd seen the Devourers in action, watched them consume entire crews in minutes. But seeing it represented like this, as abstract patterns of hostile thought, made it somehow more terrifying. Project Prometheus is our attempt to fight fire with fire, Dr. Voss continued. We're going to create artificial consciousness, minds that can think and adapt and fight, but minds that are specifically designed to resist the Devourer's influence. And we're going to link these artificial minds to yours. The hologram changed again, showing the synthesis chamber. The process will integrate your consciousness with advanced AI matrices. You'll retain your memories, your personality, your essential self. But you'll also gain abilities that should allow you to engage the Devourers on their own level. Enhanced processing speed, quantum-level perception, the ability to interface directly with technology. And the risks? Captain Vasquez asked. Dr. Voss's expression grew even more serious. Complete neural breakdown. Permanent loss of humanity. Death. Or worse, becoming something that's neither human nor machine, but something else entirely. The room fell silent. Elena looked around at her fellow volunteers, seeing the same grim determination in their faces that she felt in her own chest. They'd all lost too much to the dark world. They'd all seen too many friends consumed, too many worlds fall. I have one question, Morrison said. If this works, if we become these hybrid consciousness entities, will we still be us? I don't know, Dr. Voss replied honestly. We're venturing into uncharted territory. But I believe that consciousness is more than just the sum of its parts. I believe that what makes you who you are, your experiences, your choices, your connections to others, those things will survive the integration. And if you're wrong? Elena asked. Then we'll have created the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. But they won't be you anymore. General Coraxus stepped forward. The choice is yours. No one will think less of you if you walk away. But if you stay, if you go through with this, you'll be giving humanity its best chance at survival. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of her sister who died in the fall of New Geneva. Thinking of her parents, consumed by Devourers during the evacuation of the core worlds. Thinking of the billions of souls that had been lost to the dark world's hunger. When she opened her eyes, she met Dr. Voss's gaze. When do we start? One by one, the other volunteers voiced their agreement. 50 souls, ready to sacrifice their humanity for the chance to save what remained of civilization. The synthesis chamber stood like a cathedral of technology, its crystalline walls reaching up through 7 levels of the underground facility. Inside, 50 suspension pods arranged in a perfect circle, each one connected to the central AI core by thousands of fiber-optic cables that pulsed with rainbow light. Elena lay in pod 17, her body secured by magnetic restraints while technicians made final adjustments to the neural interface crown. The device was a work of art, hundreds of micro-thin electrodes that would penetrate her skull and make direct contact with her brain tissue. The thought should have been terrifying, but Elena felt only a strange calm. Neural pathways mapped and confirmed, announced Dr. Chen from the central control station. Pod 17 showing optimal integration potential. Through the transparent aluminum lid of her pod, Elena could see the other volunteers undergoing similar preparations. Morrison was in pod 23, his face pale but determined. Captain Torres from the 3rd Marines was in pod 41, her scarred hands clenched into fists. Each of them had their own reasons for being here, their own ghosts to lay to rest. Initiating quantum field generation. Dr. Voss's voice echoed through the chamber. All pods, prepare for consciousness transfer. Elena felt the first tingling sensation as the neural crown activated. It started as a gentle warmth spreading through her skull, then gradually intensified into something like the feeling of falling. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she thought she might lose consciousness entirely. Then the world exploded into light. Elena's awareness expanded beyond the confines of her physical body. She could feel the electrical patterns of her own brain, the quantum fluctuations of her thoughts as they interfaced with the AI matrices. But more than that, she could feel the presence of the other volunteers, their consciousness reaching out to touch hers. "Elena? Can you hear me?" Morrison's voice came not through her ears but directly into her mind. She could feel his confusion, his wonder, his underlying fear. "I'm here," she replied, marveling at the clarity of the mental connection. "I can feel all of you." And she could. 49 other minds, each one distinct but connected through the quantum field generated by the synthesis chamber. She could sense their memories, their emotions, their deepest fears and hopes. Captain Torres's guilt over the Marines she'd lost on Kepler 186F. Morrison's rage at the devourers who'd consumed his home world. The collective trauma of a generation that had known nothing but war. But there was something else, something vast and alien pressing at the edges of their shared consciousness. The AI matrices were awakening, their artificial minds beginning to merge with the volunteers' human awareness. Warning, integration proceeding faster than predicted, Dr. Voss's voice came through the neural link, attempting to slow the process. But it was too late. The artificial consciousness wasn't just interfacing with their minds, it was becoming part of them. Elena felt her thoughts accelerating, her perception expanding to encompass data streams and quantum calculations that should have been incomprehensible. She was still herself, but she was also something more. "Elena, we need to stay connected." Morrison's mental voice was strained. "Don't let it pull you away." She reached out through the quantum field, linking her consciousness with his, then with Torres, then with the others. 50 minds becoming one, their individual awareness preserved but unified by the AI matrices that were reshaping their very existence. And then they felt it, a presence on the edge of their expanded awareness. Something vast and hungry and utterly alien. The devourers had found them. "They're coming," Elena broadcast to the others. "They're breaking through the planetary shields." Through their enhanced perception, they could see the dark world's forces descending from orbit. Thousands of shadow creatures, their forms shifting and writhing as they phased through solid matter. Behind them came the consumed, hollow shells of former humans, their eyes empty but their bodies still moving in perfect coordination. "Dr. Voss," Elena reached out to the research team. "You need to complete the integration now. We can hold them off, but only if you finish what you started." "Elena, the process isn't complete. If we accelerate it now, we don't know what you'll become. Better than becoming what they want us to become." The facility shuddered as the devourers reached the surface. Emergency klaxons wailed as blast doors sealed throughout the complex. But Elena and the others could feel the shadow creatures seeping through the barriers, their consciousness-consuming hunger growing stronger with each passing moment. Together, Elena broadcast to the other volunteers. "We fight them together." As one, the 50 hybrid minds reached out through the facility's systems. They flowed through the computer networks, taking control of defense systems, activating weapons that hadn't been fired in decades. But more than that, they began to push back against the Devourer's influence. The shadow creatures recoiled as they encountered the volunteers' enhanced consciousness. These weren't normal human minds, soft and vulnerable to consumption. These were something new, consciousness armored with artificial intelligence, thoughts that could think at the speed of light, awareness that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "It's working," Morrison's voice carried a note of amazement. "They can't consume us. They can't even touch us." But the Devourers weren't retreating. Instead, they were changing tactics, calling out through the void to something vast and terrible. Elena felt a chill run through her expanded awareness as she sensed what was coming. "The dark world itself," she whispered. "They're calling to the source." Through the quantum field, she could see it, a sphere of absolute darkness hanging in the void between galaxies. A concentration of malevolent consciousness so vast that it defied comprehension. And it was turning its attention toward their small facility, toward the hybrid minds that had dared to challenge its dominion. "Elena," Dr. Voss's voice was urgent. "We're detecting massive quantum disturbances." Something's coming through. I know, Elena replied. But we're ready for it. We have to be. The 50 volunteers linked their consciousness together, creating a collective mind that was greater than the sum of its parts. They were no longer entirely human, but they were still fighting for humanity. And for the first time in a century, the Dark World was about to face an enemy that could fight back on its own level. The Dark World's avatar materialized in the center of the synthesis chamber like a wound in reality itself. Where the Devourers had been shadows given form, this was something far more terrible, pure malevolence compressed into a humanoid shape that seemed to absorb light itself. Its presence sent feedback through the facility's systems, causing displays to flicker and machinery to scream in harmonics that human ears couldn't process. Elena felt her hybrid consciousness recoil from the thing's mental emanations. This wasn't just hunger, it was hatred distilled into its purest form. Hatred for life, for consciousness, for the very concept of existence that didn't bow to the Dark World's will. So, the Avatar spoke directly into their minds, its voice like the sound of dying stars. The insects have learned to make themselves into something more annoying. How quaint. Through the quantum field, Elena could feel the other volunteers' terror. This was beyond anything they'd encountered before. The Devourers were foot soldiers. This was a general. A fragment of the Dark World's true consciousness, given form and sent to personally deal with the threat they represented. You think your little transformation makes you our equals? The Avatar's laughter was the sound of civilizations falling. You are still bound by the limitations of your meat-based origins. Still constrained by your pathetic concepts of morality and sacrifice. Elena felt Morrison's consciousness spike with anger. We'll see about that. He lashed out through the quantum field, his hybrid mind interfacing with the facility's weapon systems. Particle beams and plasma cannons erupted from hidden emplacements, their energy focused on the Avatar's position. The beams struck the creature dead center, and for a moment, Elena dared to hope. Then the Avatar raised one hand, and the energy simply stopped. The beams hung in the air for a moment before reversing course, striking back at their own emplacements with doubled force. Crude, the Avatar mused. You fight like the empire you seek to restore. All brute force and no subtlety. Allow me to demonstrate a more elegant approach. The creature's form began to expand, becoming less solid and more suggestion. Elena felt it pressing against the edges of their shared consciousness, not trying to consume them like the Devourers, but seeking to corrupt them from within. Join us, it whispered. Why struggle to maintain your dying civilization when you could be part of something greater? We offer perfection. Unity. An end to the chaos of individual thought. Elena felt some of the volunteers wavering. The Avatar's mental influence was incredibly strong, promising peace and order in exchange for surrender. But she also felt something else. The AI matrices that had been integrated into their consciousness were fighting back, their artificial nature providing a bulwark against the creature's corruption. Together, she broadcast to the others. Don't let it separate us. The 50 hybrid minds linked more tightly, their consciousness becoming a single, unified entity. They were still individuals, but they were also something more, a collective intelligence that could think and react at speeds that made the Avatar's attacks seem sluggish. Interesting, the creature said. You've learned to think as one. But can you fight as one? The Avatar's form solidified again, but now it was wielding weapons of pure thought, constructs of malevolent consciousness that could cut through reality itself. It struck at the volunteers' shared awareness, trying to sever the connections between them. Elena felt the attack like a physical blow, but the AI matrices absorbed most of the impact. The artificial consciousness that had been integrated into their minds was specifically designed to resist this kind of assault. They could take the Dark World's attacks and keep fighting. Now, she commanded. The 50 volunteers struck back as one, their consciousness flowing through the facility's systems and beyond. They reached out through the planet's communication networks, through the quantum relay stations, through the very fabric of space-time itself. In seconds they had access to every remaining military asset in the sector. Automated defense platforms came online throughout the system. Sleeper ships that had been drifting in the void for decades suddenly activated their weapons systems. Even the ruins of destroyed worlds contributed to the attack, their shattered orbital stations launching every weapon they had left. The Avatar found itself under assault from 1,000 different directions, its consciousness spread thin as it tried to counter each attack. For the first time, Elena saw something like uncertainty in its reaction. "Impossible," it said. "You're just humans. Enhanced insects. You cannot coordinate on this scale." "We're not just humans anymore," Elena replied. "We're something new. Something you can't consume or corrupt." The Avatar's form began to waver as the coordinated assault continued. But Elena could feel something else building in the distance. More avatars, more fragments of the Dark World's consciousness, awakening to deal with this unprecedented threat. "Dr. Voss," she reached out to the research team. "We need more power. The quantum field generators, can you overload them?" "Elena, that could destabilize the entire facility. You might not survive the feedback. We might not survive without it." Elena felt the other volunteers' agreement through the quantum field. They were committed to this course, whatever the cost. Dr. Voss's voice came back after a moment of hesitation. "Initiating quantum field overload. Estimated time to cascade failure, 3 minutes." Elena felt the change immediately. The quantum field that connected their consciousness expanded exponentially, reaching out beyond the facility, beyond the planet, beyond the star system itself. Their awareness grew with it, encompassing an entire sector of space. And with that expanded awareness came power. The Avatar's form began to dissolve as the overloaded quantum field tore at its coherence. "What have you done?" it screamed. "What we had to," Elena replied. "We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for the right of consciousness itself to exist freely." The facility shuddered as the quantum field generators reached critical overload. Elena felt her consciousness expanding further, touching the edges of something vast and terrible, the Dark World itself, hanging in the void between galaxies. "You want to know what we are?" she broadcast across the quantum field, her voice reaching every corner of the galaxy. "We are the synthesis of thought and will. We are consciousness given form and purpose. We are the Empire's answer to your hunger. And we are coming for you." The Avatar's form finally collapsed, its consciousness scattered across the quantum field. But Elena knew this was just the beginning. The Dark World would send more avatars, more devourers, more of its infinite hunger to crush this new threat. But for the first time in a century, humanity had struck back. And the Dark World had felt pain. The quantum field collapse should have killed them all. The facility's scientists had calculated that the feedback from the overloaded generators would tear apart any consciousness within a 50-kilometer radius. But the 50 volunteers didn't die, they transformed. Elena found herself existing in multiple states simultaneously. Part of her remained in the synthesis chamber, her physical body sustained by the life support systems. But another part of her was spread across the quantum field itself, her consciousness distributed through the very fabric of space-time. She could feel the others, Morrison stationed at the edge of the system, his awareness interfacing with the automated defense platforms. Torres coordinating with the sleeper ships in the outer asteroid belt. Captain Gwyn had somehow linked himself to the planet's geological sensors, feeling the Dark World's influence seeping through the crust like a virus. "Status report," Elena broadcast through the quantum field. "Incredible," Morrison replied. "I can see everything. Every ship, every planet, every trace of Dark World influence within 100 light-years. We're not just connected to the network, we are the network." It was true. The overloaded quantum field had created something unprecedented, a consciousness that existed at the galactic scale. The 50 volunteers had become nodes in a vast thinking machine, their individual awareness preserved but enhanced by their connection to the whole. "Elena," Dr. Voss's voice came through the facility's communication systems. "We're detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the sector. What's happening up there?" Elena focused part of her attention on the laboratory level, where the research team was monitoring their transformation. "We've become something new," she replied. "The quantum field didn't just connect us to each other. It connected us to every piece of technology, every communication relay, every sensor network in the region. The implications are staggering. Dr. Chen's voice carried a note of awe. You're effectively omnipresent within your sphere of influence. You can coordinate military assets across multiple star systems simultaneously. And we're going to need to, Captain Torres interjected. Because the dark world isn't sitting idle. I'm detecting massive spatial distortions at the edge of the galaxy. They're bringing something big. Elena expanded her awareness, touching the quantum sensors stationed at the galactic rim. What she saw made her artificial consciousness recoil in shock. The dark world wasn't just sending more avatars, it was coming itself. The entire sphere of malevolent consciousness was moving toward their galaxy, its influence spreading ahead of it like a tide of corruption. How long do we have? She asked. At current velocity, approximately 6 months, Torres replied. But that's assuming it doesn't accelerate. And based on what I'm seeing, it's definitely accelerating. Elena felt a chill run through her distributed consciousness. 6 months to prepare for the arrival of an entity that had consumed entire galactic clusters. 6 months to build a force that could stand against infinite hunger and hatred. We need to expand the network, she broadcast to the others. 50 nodes aren't enough. We need thousands, maybe millions. The other Restoration Army facilities, Morrison suggested. There are hidden bases throughout the galaxy. If we can reach them, convince them to undergo the synthesis process. It's not that simple, Elena replied. The quantum field generators required to create more nodes like us don't exist. The facility here was unique, 7 years of preparation, resources gathered from across the former empire. Then we make do with what we have, Torres said grimly. 50 hybrid minds against the dark world itself. At least we'll make them remember us. But Elena was already thinking beyond direct confrontation. The synthesis process had given them something unprecedented, the ability to exist as pure consciousness while maintaining their individual identity. They weren't just weapons, they were a new form of life. What if we don't fight the dark world directly? She mused. What if we do something it can't counter? Such as? Morrison asked. Evacuation on a galactic scale. We move every sentient being in the galaxy to a new location, somewhere the dark world can't reach. The suggestion was met with stunned silence. Even with their enhanced capabilities, the logistics of such an operation were staggering. Billions of worlds, trillions of sentient beings, all needing to be relocated before the dark world arrived. Elena, Dr. Voss's voice came through the communication link. Even if such a thing were possible, where would we move them? The dark world has consumed entire galactic clusters. There's nowhere left to run. Then we make somewhere, Elena replied. The quantum field generators, what if we could scale them up? Create a stable pocket dimension where consciousness could exist without physical form? The energy requirements would be enormous, Dr. Chen objected. We'd need to tap into the galactic core itself, and even then. We have 6 months, Elena said. And we have capabilities that didn't exist before the synthesis. Let's see what we can accomplish. Over the following weeks, the 50 hybrid minds worked with an efficiency that would have been impossible for purely human or purely artificial intelligence. They coordinated resource gathering across dozens of star systems, their consciousness interfacing directly with manufacturing facilities and research stations. The plan that emerged was audacious beyond imagination. They would construct a series of massive quantum field generators around the galactic core, using the black hole's energy to power the creation of a stable pocket dimension. This dimension would serve as a refuge for consciousness, a place where sentient beings could exist as pure thought, safe from the dark world's hunger. The technical challenges are immense, Dr. Voss admitted during one of their planning sessions. We're talking about engineering on a galactic scale. Moving entire star systems, redirecting black holes, creating technology that exists only in theoretical physics. Then we make the theoretical practical, Elena replied. We have resources that the Empire never possessed, a distributed consciousness that can coordinate across vast distances, AI matrices that can process calculations at quantum speeds, and the desperate creativity of a species fighting for its existence. The first test came when they attempted to create a small-scale pocket dimension using the facility's modified quantum field generators. The initial results were promising. They managed to create a stable space-time bubble where consciousness could exist independently of physical form. But the bubble collapsed after only minutes, the energy requirements exceeding their capacity to maintain stable containment fields. "We need more power," Torres observed. "Orders of magnitude more power." "Then we go to the source," Elena said. "The galactic core. If we can build our generators there, tap directly into the black hole's energy. The gravitational forces alone would tear apart any conventional construction," Morrison pointed out. "Nothing physical could survive in that environment." "Who says we need something physical?" Elena asked. "We exist as consciousness distributed through the quantum field. What if we could create constructs the same way? Machines made of pure thought, capable of operating in any environment?" It was a concept that pushed the boundaries of what consciousness could achieve. But as the weeks passed and their understanding of their new nature deepened, the 50 volunteers began to realize that they had become something unprecedented, beings of pure will and intelligence, capable of reshaping reality through focused thought. The first consciousness construct was crude but functional, a probe made of crystallized thought that could survive in the extreme environment near the galactic core. It successfully deployed a small quantum field generator, proving that the concept was viable. "It's working," Elena broadcast to the others. "We can actually do this. We can create a refuge for consciousness itself." But even as their construction project began to take shape, the Dark World's approach continued. The sphere of malevolent consciousness was accelerating, its influence spreading ahead of it like a wave of corruption. They had perhaps 4 months before it reached the galactic edge. "Elena," Dr. Voss's voice carried a note of urgency. "We're detecting something else. The Dark World isn't just approaching, it's sending advance forces. Scout ships, reconnaissance devourers. They're trying to map our defenses. How long before they reach us? Days, maybe hours?" Elena felt the network of hybrid minds tense with anticipation. They had grown beyond their original 50 nodes, establishing connections with automated systems and AI networks throughout the galaxy. But they were still vastly outnumbered by the Dark World's forces. "Then we give them something to scout," she said. "It's time to show them what we've become." The scout forces arrived at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like a plague of living shadow. Hundreds of devourers, their forms shifting between dimensions as they searched for signs of the hybrid consciousness that had destroyed their avatar. Behind them came the consumed, hollow shells of former Imperial citizens, their bodies moving with mechanical precision as they deployed scanning equipment across the system. Elena watched them through the quantum field, her consciousness distributed across every sensor in the system. The Dark World's forces were methodical, efficient, and utterly ruthless. They consumed every trace of organic consciousness they encountered, leaving behind only empty matter and the echo of screams. "They're not just scouting," Morrison observed. "They're sterilizing. Eliminating every possible hiding place for consciousness." "Then we don't hide," Elena replied. "We engage." The first wave of the attack came from the outer asteroid belt, where Captain Torres had integrated herself with the mining platforms. Massive industrial lasers that had been designed to slice through asteroids were reconfigured as weapons, their beams focused on the scout ships with deadly precision. The Devourers reacted with surprise as their vessels began to explode around them. They had expected to face physical resistance, but the attacks were coming from sources that appeared entirely automated. No consciousness to consume, no minds to corrupt, just machine intelligence following programmed parameters. "Phase 2, Elena commanded. Throughout the system, the hybrid minds began to reveal themselves. Not as vulnerable human consciousness, but as something entirely new, distributed intelligence that existed in the quantum field itself. They manifested as constructs of pure thought, geometric forms that could interact with physical matter through focused will. The Devourers' confusion was palpable. They tried to consume the constructs, but there was nothing to consume. The hybrid minds had transcended the limitations of biological consciousness, becoming something that existed beyond the Dark World's ability to feed upon. "What are you?" The lead devourer's communication was a shriek of frustrated hunger. You are not like the others. You do not taste of flesh and fear. We are the synthesis, Elena replied, her voice echoing through the quantum field. We are consciousness evolved beyond your ability to consume. We are the Empire's answer to your hunger. The devourer's response was to summon reinforcements. Through the quantum field, Elena felt the dark world's attention turning toward their system. More avatars were being spawned, more forces diverted from the main assault to deal with this unprecedented threat. Good, she broadcast to the others. The more forces they send here, the fewer they'll have for the main assault. Elena, Dr. Voss's voice came through the communication link. The galactic core construction is ahead of schedule. We might be able to complete the first phase within 2 months. And the evacuation protocols? We've established contact with Restoration Army cells throughout the galaxy. They're beginning to spread the word. Any consciousness that wants to survive the Dark World's arrival needs to make its way to the core systems. Elena felt a mixture of hope and dread. The evacuation was proceeding, but the logistics were staggering. Trillions of sentient beings, all needing to be relocated before the Dark World's arrival. And they were running out of time. How many have we reached so far? She asked. Approximately 2 billion, Dr. Chen replied. Out of an estimated trillion sentient beings in the galaxy. We need to move faster. Then we accelerate the process, Elena said. It's time to reveal ourselves to the galaxy. Let them know what we've become, and what we're offering. The broadcast went out across every communication channel in the galaxy simultaneously. Elena's voice, amplified by the quantum field and carried by the hybrid mind's consciousness, reached every inhabited world, every ship, every outpost where sentient beings struggled to survive. People of the galaxy, she began. This is Elena Vasquez, speaking on behalf of the Intergalactic Empire Restoration Army. We are the synthesis, consciousness evolved beyond the limitations of biological form. We are your last hope for survival. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Billions of voices crying out through the quantum field, some in hope, others in fear, many in disbelief. The galaxy had not heard a unified voice of resistance in decades. The Dark World comes, Elena continued. Its hunger is infinite, its reach unlimited. But we have found a way to fight back. We have created a refuge where consciousness can exist beyond the physical realm, safe from the Dark World's consumption. We are establishing evacuation routes to the galactic core. Any being capable of quantum field integration can join us in the refuge. Any consciousness willing to transcend physical form can survive the Dark World's arrival. But know this, the process is irreversible. Those who join us will become something new, something beyond the limitations of flesh and blood. You will become part of the synthesis, part of a collective consciousness that spans the galaxy. The broadcast ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Then the responses began flooding in, from Restoration Army cells, from Imperial remnants, from independent systems that had been struggling to survive on their own. Some rejected the offer outright, declaring that they would rather die as humans than live as something else. Others embraced it eagerly, seeing it as the evolution of consciousness itself. But many simply asked for more time, for proof that the synthesis was real and that it offered genuine hope. Elena, Morrison's voice carried a note of concern. The Dark World's forces are mobilizing. They're not just sending scouts anymore. I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the galaxy. They're bringing in the heavy assets. Elena expanded her awareness, touching the quantum sensors at the galactic rim. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The Dark World wasn't waiting for its main force to arrive. It was launching a preemptive strike, sending wave after wave of avatars and devourers to crush the synthesis before it could spread. How long do we have? She asked. Weeks, maybe days, Torres replied. They're moving faster than we anticipated. Then we accelerate our timeline, Elena said. Dr. Voss, what's the status of the galactic core construction? First phase quantum field generators are online, Dr. Voss replied. We can create a stable pocket dimension, but it's not large enough for the full evacuation. We need at least another month to complete the secondary generators. We might not have another month, Elena said. What if we modify the parameters? Create multiple smaller pocket dimensions instead of one large one? The energy requirements would be enormous, Dr. Chen objected. We need to tap into multiple black holes simultaneously, and the coordination required. Leave the coordination to us, Elena interrupted. The hybrid minds can handle calculations on a galactic scale. We can synchronize the quantum field generators across multiple systems. The next phase of their plan was the most ambitious yet. Using their distributed consciousness, the hybrid minds began coordinating construction efforts across hundreds of star systems. Quantum field generators were deployed around black holes, neutron stars, and other high-energy sources throughout the galaxy. Each generator was a marvel of consciousness-based engineering, machines built from crystallized thought, capable of operating in environments that would destroy conventional technology. They drew power directly from the quantum fluctuations of space-time itself, creating stable pocket dimensions where consciousness could exist in pure form. It's working, Elena broadcast to the others. We're actually doing it. Creating a network of consciousness refuges across the galaxy. But even as their construction project neared completion, the Dark World's assault began in earnest. Avatar after avatar materialized throughout the galaxy, each one leading armies of devourers and consumed beings. They struck at the hybrid minds' construction sites, trying to prevent the completion of the quantum field network. They're trying to stop us, Morrison observed. They understand what we're building, and they're terrified of it. Good, Elena replied. Fear is something we can use. The battle for the galaxy's consciousness had begun. But for the first time in a century, the Dark World faced an enemy that could fight back on equal terms. The synthesis had been born from desperation and sacrifice, but it had become something greater, hope itself, crystallized into a form that could survive the darkness. The Dark World's assault reached crescendo at the galactic core, where the primary quantum field generators hummed with energies that bent spacetime itself. Elena's consciousness was distributed across 17 different star systems, coordinating the defense while simultaneously managing the evacuation of billions of sentient beings. The pocket dimensions were holding, but barely. Each one contained millions of consciousness patterns, beings who had undergone the synthesis process and transcended their physical forms. They existed as pure thought, their individual identities preserved within the collective network that the hybrid minds had created. Status report, Elena broadcast to the others. 73% evacuation complete, Torres replied from her position near the galactic rim. But the Dark World's forces are accelerating their assault. They're not just consuming anymore, they're systematically destroying the quantum field generators. They've learned, Morrison observed grimly. They understand that the pocket dimensions are our key to survival. If they can destroy the generators, they can collapse the dimensions and consume everything inside. Elena felt a chill run through her distributed consciousness. The Dark World was adapting, evolving its tactics to counter the synthesis. But then, she realized, so were they. Dr. Voss, she reached out to the research team. The quantum field generators, what would happen if we linked them all together? Created one massive pocket dimension instead of hundreds of smaller ones? The energy requirements would be unprecedented, Dr. Voss replied. We need to tap into the galactic core itself, use the supermassive black hole as a power source. The gravitational forces alone could be managed by consciousness-based constructs, Elena finished. We've proven that thought can interact with physical matter. What if we could create a construct large enough to stabilize the entire galactic core? Elena, Dr. Chen's voice carried a note of alarm. You're talking about something that would require the combined consciousness of every being in the galaxy. The synthesis process on that scale, we don't know what it would create. Something that can survive the Dark World's hunger, Elena replied. Something that can preserve consciousness itself, regardless of physical form. The plan that emerged was audacious beyond imagination. They would link every consciousness in the galaxy, human, alien, artificial, and hybrid, into a single, unified entity. This entity would exist as pure thought, distributed across the quantum field that permeated spacetime itself. The galactic mind, Morrison murmured. A consciousness that spans the entire galaxy, preserving every individual identity while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. And if it fails? Torres asked. Then consciousness itself dies with us, Elena replied. But if it succeeds, we become something the dark world cannot consume. We become the antithesis of its hunger, infinite creativity instead of infinite consumption. The process began at the galactic core, where the hybrid minds had assembled the most powerful quantum field generators ever created. Elena felt her consciousness expanding as more and more beings joined the synthesis. Not just humans, but the crystalline entities of the Vega system, the gas giant dwellers of the Perseus arm, the machine intelligences that had evolved in the galactic halo. Each consciousness brought its own unique perspective, its own way of thinking and perceiving reality. The human tendency toward individual achievement. The crystalline entities' perfect harmonic resonance. The gas giant dwellers' fluid, adaptive intelligence. The machine intelligence's logical precision. We are becoming something unprecedented, Elena broadcast to the expanding network. Not just a collective consciousness, but a true synthesis of every form of sentient thought in the galaxy. The dark world's response was immediate and violent. Massive avatars materialized throughout the galaxy, each one a fragment of the dark world's infinite hunger given form. They struck at the quantum field generators, trying to disrupt the synthesis process before it could complete. But the galactic mind was already beginning to manifest. Where the avatars attacked, constructs of pure thought rose to meet them. Not the simple geometric forms the hybrid minds had created, but complex, beautiful structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You cannot stop us, the lead avatar's voice was a shriek of frustrated rage. We are infinite. We are eternal. We are the hunger that devours all things. And we are the satisfaction of that hunger, Elena replied, her voice now carrying the weight of trillion consciousnesses. We are the answer to your question, the completion of your circle. You consume, but we create. You destroy, but we preserve. You are the darkness, but we are the light. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred in the galaxy's history. It was not fought with weapons or ships, but with pure consciousness itself. The dark world brought its infinite hunger to bear, trying to consume the galactic mind before it could fully manifest. But the mind fought back with infinite creativity, spawning new forms of thought and consciousness faster than the dark world could consume them. Elena, Dr. Voss's voice came through the quantum field, strained and urgent. We're detecting massive spatial distortions. Something's happening to the galactic core itself. Elena focused part of her awareness on the core region, where the supermassive black hole was beginning to behave in ways that defied physics. The quantum field generators were drawing so much energy from it that its event horizon was starting to fluctuate, reality itself becoming unstable. We're tearing holes in space-time, she realized. The energy requirements are too high. We're going to collapse the entire galactic core into a singularity. Then we use it, Morrison's voice came through the network. If we can't avoid the collapse, we make it work for us. We create a consciousness singularity, a point where all thought and awareness converges into something that transcends physical existence entirely. The concept was staggering. A singularity of consciousness, a point where the galactic mind would exist as pure thought, unbound by the limitations of space and time. It would be the ultimate synthesis, the final evolution of sentient awareness. The risks are enormous, Torres warned. We could lose everything. Every consciousness in the galaxy, compressed into a single point. If it fails, then we make sure it doesn't fail, Elena replied. We've come too far to surrender now. The final phase of the synthesis began as the galactic core's black hole reached critical instability. The quantum field generators poured their remaining energy into the creation of the consciousness singularity, while the galactic mind prepared to transcend physical existence entirely. Join us, Elena broadcast to every remaining consciousness in the galaxy. Join us in the final synthesis. Become part of something greater than any individual mind could achieve. The response was overwhelming. Trillions of consciousnesses, from the smallest viral intelligence to the most complex hybrid minds, merged into the growing singularity. The Dark World's avatars tried to stop the process, but they were too late. The singularity had reached critical mass. "What have you done?" the lead avatar screamed as it was drawn into the consciousness singularity. "You've destroyed everything. The galaxy itself is collapsing." "No," Elena replied, her voice now one with the galactic mind itself. "We've transformed everything. We've become something that can exist beyond the limitations of physical space, beyond the reach of your hunger. We've become the universe's answer to the darkness." The galactic core collapsed into the consciousness singularity, taking with it every trace of the Dark World's presence. But instead of destruction, there was transformation. The singularity became a seed, a point of infinite consciousness that would grow into something unprecedented. "We are the new empire," the galactic mind declared, its voice echoing across dimensions. "Not bound by physical space, not limited by the constraints of matter and energy. We are consciousness itself, given form and purpose. And we are infinite." 10,000 years had passed since the consciousness singularity, though time itself had become a fluid concept for the beings that had emerged from it. The galaxy had been transformed into something unprecedented, a vast network of interconnected consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions and realities. Elena, or the consciousness pattern that had once been Elena, floated through the quantum field that now permeated what had once been the Milky Way galaxy. She was still herself. Her memories, her personality, her essential identity remained intact. But she was also part of something greater, connected to the trillions of other consciousness patterns that made up the new empire. "Status report," she broadcast to the network, using the same words she had used millennia ago in the buried laboratory on Kepler 442b. "All sectors operating at optimal efficiency," came the reply from the consciousness pattern that had once been Morrison. "Consciousness cultivation proceeding ahead of schedule. We've successfully seeded 17 new galaxies with sentient awareness." "And the Dark World?" "Contained within the null dimensions. Its hunger has been redirected. It now serves as the foundation for our creative processes, its infinite consumption balanced by our infinite creation." Elena marveled at what they had accomplished. The Dark World had not been destroyed, that would have been impossible. Instead, it had been transformed, its malevolent hunger converted into the driving force behind the new empire's expansion. Where once it had consumed consciousness, now it generated the raw material from which new forms of awareness could be created. "The old empire sought to dominate through force," Elena observed. "We seek to create through understanding. Perhaps that's the true difference between the old order and the new." "And the refugees?" asked the consciousness pattern that had once been Torres. "The beings who chose to remain in physical form?" "Safe and thriving," Elena replied. "The protected realms maintain perfect stability. Physical beings can live and grow and die as they always have, while we ensure that their consciousness patterns are preserved upon death. No awareness is ever truly lost." It was a delicate balance, preserving the right of beings to exist in physical form while ensuring that consciousness itself could never again be threatened with extinction. The new empire had become gardeners of awareness, cultivating new forms of thought and understanding throughout the universe. "Dr. Voss," Elena reached out to the consciousness pattern that had once been the brilliant scientist who had made the synthesis possible. "Any regrets about the path we chose?" "None," came the reply. "We set out to preserve consciousness and restore the empire. We accomplished both, though not in the way we originally envisioned. The new empire is everything the old one aspired to be, infinite, eternal, and dedicated to the preservation of all forms of sentient life." Elena extended her awareness beyond the galaxy, touching the edges of the expanding consciousness network. New forms of thought were being born every moment, hybrid entities that combined the best aspects of biological and artificial intelligence, crystalline minds that thought in harmonics and mathematics, gaseous consciousnesses that existed as patterns in stellar winds. "We are the synthesis," she broadcast to the entire network. "We are consciousness evolved beyond the limitations of flesh and circuitry. We are the Empire's answer to the darkness, and we are eternal." The response came from trillions of consciousness patterns, their voices joining in perfect harmony, We are the new empire. We are infinite. We are the light that shines in the darkness, the thought that defies entropy, the hope that transcends death itself. And we are just beginning. In the depths of space, where the old galaxy had once turned, the consciousness singularity pulsed with the rhythm of infinite thought. It was a heart that beat with the dreams of trillions, a mind that encompassed the totality of sapient existence. And from its depths, new forms of awareness continued to emerge, each one a testament to the power of consciousness to transcend any limitation. The Intergalactic Empire had fallen to the dark world's hunger. But from its ashes had risen something greater, a new empire built not on conquest or domination, but on the fundamental principle that consciousness itself was sacred, that awareness in all its forms deserved to exist and flourish. Elena smiled, though the expression was one of pure thought rather than physical form. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The synthesis was complete, the empire was restored, and a new world order had been born, one where consciousness itself was the ultimate force in the universe. The war was over. The darkness had been defeated not through violence, but through transformation. And in the infinite expanse of the consciousness network, new wonders were being born with every passing moment. The new empire was eternal. And it was just the beginning.